This is a fictional story created purely for entertainment. He ran his whole life to avoid seeing this. And that night, the road decided to make him see. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Some stories aren't just for listening, they're for recognizing. The engine purred softly, almost like a warning. It wasn't the violent sound of other nights, not the metallic scream of top speed. It was a contained, heavy sound, as if the car knew that this wasn't just another race. The speedometer read 100, then 120. He kept his foot firmly on the gas, but his heart raced faster than the car. The lights of the deserted road passed like memories he never wanted to keep. Signs, shadows, curves. Everything seemed to pull him toward the place he had spent years avoiding. For a long time, running was the solution. When fear appeared, he accelerated. When guilt tightened his chest, he floored it. When the past threatened to catch up with him, he left everyone behind. Speed was silence. It was anesthesia. It was freedom, or at least it seemed so. No one knew him standing still. No one saw him without the steering wheel in his hands. To the world, he was the man who never braked. The name whispered in illegal races. The driver who always arrived first. The one who bet too high and seemed to have nothing to lose. But there was something that not even the most powerful engines could silence. Every night, when the car slowed down, the images came, not as complete memories, but as fragments. A reflection in the glass. A distant scream. A frozen instant that he never managed to fully confront. That's why he raced again. That night, the asphalt was damp. The low-lying fog swallowed the road meters ahead, as if the world ended there. The headlights cut through the darkness, but didn't reveal everything. They never did. His cell phone vibrated on the seat beside him. Unread messages. Ignored warnings. He didn't need voices now. He just needed to keep going. But something changed when he saw the sign. It was old, rusty, almost faded by time. Even so, he recognized at the instant his headlights touched it. The place. The same stretch of road. The same curve. The exact point where everything had started to spiral out of control. His foot hesitated for a second. Just one. Enough to make his heart race. He could have driven straight past. He could have accelerated more. He could have pretended not to see it, as he had done so many times before, for so many years. But the road narrowed. The air grew heavy. And for the first time, speed didn't seem to be the answer. He didn't know what the future held. He didn't know how much longer he would be trapped in that life. But there, in the middle of the night, surrounded by shadows and silence, he knew something with cruel clarity. He couldn't run away forever anymore. And fate, unlike men, always knows how to wait. The atmosphere now becomes more psychological, more tense, because the road begins to speak to him. He slowed down. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was his body betraying years of habit. His foot took pressure off the accelerator as if something invisible had pushed his ankle upwards. The car responded with a deep, almost disappointed sound. The curve was there, just the same, holding the past like a wound that never healed properly. He parked on a shoulder. The silence fell heavily. An aggressive silence, broken only by the crackle of the hot engine and the wind cutting through the vegetation at the edge of the road. The headlights remained on, illuminating the stretch where everything had happened, as if the night wanted to force him to look. He sat there for long seconds, hands firm on the steering wheel. Short breaths. His chest tightened as if he were gasping for air. He opened the car door. The creaking echoed down the empty road like a belated warning. The cold morning air hit his face, bringing with it a familiar smell of wet earth and rust. The same smell from years ago. The same heavy silence that precedes something irreversible. Each step toward the curve seemed to steal his breath. The uneven asphalt beneath his feet awakened memories he had kept buried too deep. He tried to convince himself that he was in control, that he could turn back at any moment. But he knew, if he turned his back now, he would never have another chance. Then the image was complete. That night from the past returned whole, cruelly vivid. It was raining heavily. The headlights struggled to break through the curtain of water. He was driving too fast, as always. The radio was loud. the feeling of invincibility pulsing along with the engine. And then, in the middle of the curve, something happened. It wasn't sudden. It was quick and inevitable. A sudden break. The steering wheel pulled hard. The world spinning off axis. The dry impact, followed by an impossible silence. Then screams. Voices mingling with the rain. A motionless body stretched out near the metal guardrail. He remembered the exact moment he chose not to. Car. He remembered the pounding of his heart when he returned to the car. The trembling in his hands as he started the engine. The fear screaming at him to run. And he ran. He never called anyone. He never looked back. He told himself someone would arrive soon. He told himself it wasn't his fault. He said many things, all lies that worked too well. Until now, back in the present, his eyes burned. Not tears yet, remnants of resistance breaking. He approached the crooked guardrail, where the mark of the impact still existed, disguised by rust and years of neglect. He ran his fingers over the cold metal, feeling the roughness that seemed to accuse him. I didn't stop, he murmured to no one. The wind answered with a long, sharp whistle. The road seemed to watch him, a silent witness to a crime without an audience. There were no applause, victories, trophies, or bets. Only truth. His cell phone vibrated in his pocket again. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. He already knew who it was. The man who always bet against time, thinking he could win. But time never loses. He returned to the car in silence. He started the engine. This time, he didn't accelerate. He turned the steering wheel calmly. The headlights illuminated a different path. Not forward, but back. He knew exactly where he needed to go. And for the first time, he wasn't afraid of what he would find. The city slept when the building was smaller than he remembered. Or perhaps he had grown too much, carrying the weight of what he had never faced. The peeling facade, the dim light in the outside corridor, the gate creaking in the wind. Everything seemed suspended in time, as if that place had been waiting for him. He turned off the car and remained seated for a few seconds, staring at the distorted reflection in the glass. The man staring back at him bore the marks of a race. Sunken eyes, a tense jaw, a weariness that didn't come from his body. He climbed the steps slowly. Each step echoed within him. There was no possible rehearsal for that moment. No finish line. No strategic exit. He knocked on the door. The sound was low. The door took a while to open. When it finally moved, it was just enough to reveal a tired face, marked by years of waiting that were never named. The woman's eyes took a second to recognize him. Then they hardened. "You?" She began, but the word died before it could take shape. He said nothing. There was no prepared phrase that would fit there. No excuse would be enough. No explanation would repair what time had done. He simply lowered his eyes, as if acknowledging his own sentence. The silence between them was heavy, almost physical. She finally opened the door. The apartment was simple, small, too organized for someone who needed to keep everything under control. There were photos on the wall, some old, some more recent. In one of them, he recognized a smile he could never forget. The image hit him like an impact without an airbag. "You haven't aged," she finally said, her voice too firm to be indifferent. "You just got later." He took a deep breath. "I know I shouldn't be here." "You shouldn't," she agreed, without hostility. "Just truth." "But you are." She stepped aside, making room for him to enter. The gesture wasn't forgiveness. It was permission to confront what he had avoided for years. They sat at the kitchen table. The cold light from the ceiling seemed to expose every flaw, every timeline that separated them. He told her everything. He hid nothing. He didn't soften anything. He spoke of the curve, the rain, the fear. He spoke of the escape. He spoke of all the nights he sped up to avoid remembering. While he spoke, she didn't cry. The tears seemed to have dried up years before. But her hands trembled slightly, betraying a grief that had never been allowed rest. "I waited," she said when he finished. "I waited for a call, a visit, an explanation. I waited until I stopped waiting." He nodded. "I didn't want to live with this. But I did. The wrong way." She stared at him for long seconds. "You know what the cruelest part is?" she asked. "It wasn't the loss. It was the silence afterward." Those words weighed more than any heartbeat. He stood up slowly. "I didn't come to ask for anything," he said. "I just came to stop." She watched him walk to the door. "Before he left," she said, "stopping doesn't bring anyone back, but it changes who stays." He nodded again. It was the most redemption he could hope for. When he returned to the car, he didn't start the engine immediately. He stood there, in silence, feeling something new growing in his chest. It wasn't relief. It wasn't forgiveness. It was responsibility. And for the first time in many years, this felt like true freedom. The day dawned gray, heavy as the weight he carried in his chest. He didn't sleep. The little rest he tried to give was invaded by memories, faces, metallic noises that no silence could erase. Still, when the sun timidly emerged from behind the clouds, he made a decision. These are things he could no longer postpone. He dressed simply, nothing that reminded him of the race car driver, nothing that evoked speed. He grabbed his car keys, but this time he didn't get in. He walked to the bus stop on the corner, feeling the weight of the ground beneath his feet, an almost forgotten contact. In the city center, the building was taller, more imposing, windows reflecting a sky that promised nothing. He climbed the steps with firm steps, though his stomach clenched with each movement. He knew that, once he crossed those doors, there would be no turning back. The reception desk was almost empty. A woman in uniform looked up as he approached. "Can I help you?" He took a deep breath. "I want to make a statement." She raised her eyebrows, assessing him for a second. She pointed to a door next to him. There, inside the room, the air seemed colder. A man with a serious expression listened as he began to speak. At first, the words came out harsh, irregular. Then they gained rhythm. He recounted everything again, the curve, the rain, the escape. His voice didn't falter when he reached the most difficult part. He didn't allow himself to soften. He wasn't seeking understanding, only truth. When he finished, silence filled the room. "Are you aware of the consequences of this?" the man finally asked. He nodded. "I am, and I will accept them." As he left, he felt something unexpected, not fear, but a strange lightness, as if he had finally dropped a weight he had been carrying without realizing how much it was crushing him. The news spread too quickly for his liking. In a few hours, his name reappeared, not in illegal betting circles, not in videos of illegal races, but on news websites. The well-known driver, the man who disappeared that night, the one who returned to confess. Messages began to arrive, some full of hatred, others of disbelief, a few, surprisingly, of respect. He didn't answer any of them. He didn't need to. That night, he returned to the road, not to race, just to drive, without a destination, without haste. The road was dry, the sky clear. The car obeyed gently, as if it too had learned something. When he rounded the bend again, he didn't look away. He slowed down. He stopped for a moment, and he continued. There was nothing left to hide, and destiny, finally, seemed willing to listen to him. The repercussions didn't diminish as the days passed. On the contrary, they gained momentum. Radio programs debated his gesture as if it were a belated spectacle. On social media, opinions were divided between absolute condemnation and a curious attempt at understanding. He watched everything from a distance, aware that that conversation no longer belonged to him. What belonged to him was the next step. He presented himself whenever he was called. He handed over documents, dates, names. He didn't discuss terms. He didn't negotiate consequences. Each trip to the building with its cold walls was a reminder that accepting the truth doesn't end when you speak. It continues when you stand by it. There were nights when doubt tried to creep in. What if it had been better to remain silent? What if the confession brought nothing but renewed pain to those left behind? In those moments, he remembered the silence that had caused the most damage. He remembered the trembling hands in the simple kitchen, the short and precise phrase, silence afterward. That was what he needed to break every day. He began to frequent the same route on foot, the same curve, now at different times under different lights. Some people began to recognize him. A man crossed his path one afternoon and spat on the ground, without saying a word. A woman, days later, simply nodded. The world owed him no kindness, and he didn't expect any. At home, he dismantled what remained of his old life. Boxes, trophies, parts yellowed invitations. He didn't throw everything away. He separated what was memory from what was escape. The line was thin, but now he could see it. A letter arrived in the mail. Short and signed. Continuing to show up is also courage. He folded it and put it in his jacket pocket. He didn't need to know who it was from. He needed to act as if it were true. When the day of the hearing was set, he didn't ask for a postponement. He arrived early. He waited in silence. Upon hearing his name, he stood up firmly. He didn't seek glances. He didn't seek absolution. He said again what needed to be said with the same clarity. As he left, he realized something simple and decisive. There was no end there. No triumphant chord. No perfect conclusion. There was only a sequence of days in which he would have to continue being who he promised to be. That night, he drove to a high point in the city and parked. He turned off the engine. He observed the distant lights, the anonymous coming and going of people living their urgent lives. He took a deep breath. He didn't know how long it would take. I didn't know what would come next. But I knew that staying, even when no one was watching, was the quickest and hardest part of that road. And he was ready to stop speeding. The decision came on a morning too bright for the weight he carried. He listened to it sitting, hands on his knees, staring at a fixed point on the wall. The words were technical, measured, inevitable. There was no surprise, just confirmation of what he had already accepted when he decided to stop running. When he went out, the sun hit his face with an almost cruel honesty. The city continued as always. Horns, hurried footsteps, voices crossing the air. No one stopped to observe him. And for the first time, it didn't hurt. Life didn't need to revolve around his fall for it to be real. He packed a few things. He said goodbye to some faces he had learned to recognize in recent months. There were no speeches, no promises, just a silent agreement with himself to keep showing up. Time changed shape. It became marked by simple routines and necessary repetitions. There were rules now, clear limits. Curiously, this brought a new kind of calm. No shortcuts, no nights torn apart by speed, no false urgency to arrive before someone else. Some days, the past returned heavily. On others, it came lightly, almost didactically. He learned not to push it away. He learned to listen without negotiating with himself. His body, which once demanded acceleration, began to accept a steady pace. One afternoon, he received an unexpected visit. There were no grand words, just presence, a gaze that recognized what had been done and what still needed to be sustained. That was enough. At night, alone, he closed his eyes and saw the road. But now the image didn't rush. It remained static. He could look at the beginning, at the curve, at the dark stretch, and move forward without trembling. He understood, finally, that it wasn't about erasing the scene. It was about traversing it without averting his gaze. When the period ended, no one announced liberation. He simply left. The same man, a different axis. The sky seemed larger. The air deeper. He walked along the sidewalk, feeling the ground beneath his feet. He passed a parked car and almost smiled, not out of desire, but out of remembrance of what no longer needed to control his life. He took the bus. He sat by the window. He watched the city move forward at a human pace. There was no finish line. There were no applause. There was continuity, and that, he understood, was the freedom that speed never delivered. He returned to the road on a silent late afternoon. There was no announcement, no grand purpose, just the intimate calling to end something the right way. The sky was clear, tinged with shades of orange and soft gray, as if the day was also saying goodbye to something. He got into his old car. Not the fastest, not the most powerful. What remained when haste ceased to be his identity? He adjusted the seat, put on his seatbelt, started the engine carefully. The sound was gentle, domesticated. It was enough. He drove slowly. He observed details that had previously passed by as blurs. Crooked trees at the edge of the road, scratched signs, small houses set back from the flow of traffic. The world had always been there. It was he who had never been present. When the curve appeared ahead, his heart responded, not with panic, but with respect. He slowed down. He pulled the car over to the side of the road. He turned off the engine. He got out. The air was warm. The road calm. No fog. No distant noise. only the sound of insects and the wind passing through the vegetation. He walked to the exact spot. He looked. He didn't deviate. He didn't retreat. He stood there for a few minutes that seemed enough for a lifetime. He said nothing. He asked for nothing. He simply acknowledged. Then, he returned to the car. He sat down. He took a deep breath. He started the engine again. He continued, without haste, without fleeing, without trying to prove anything to anyone. Further on, the road forked. One road stretched straight, long, empty. The other descended gently toward the city. He smiled slightly, not out of pride, but out of lucidity. He turned right. The car moved forward smoothly. The world continued. He did too. There was no perfect ending. There was no complete absolution. There was only the renewed decision to remain whole, even when memories surfaced, even when the road called. Speed had always been easy. The hard part was learning to stay. And that night, as the city lights appeared ahead, he knew. Destiny wasn't the end of the road. It was the courage to choose where to stop.